Hello everyone, Violet Howler here, and welcome to episode 0 of my Constructing Legends video essay series focused on the Netflix animated series Voltron Legendary Defender. Joining me today is my co-host.
Hi, I'm friends with Howler here. Thanks for watching his channel. I'm here as moral support for him for this video. Why do you need moral support for this video?
Because we started this because we started doing this as a stream last weekend, and I want to finish it together.
Fair enough. So before we get started, let's give you all a brief bit of a background about what this show is.
Yeah. Voltron Legendary Defender is an animated sci-fi action series that released on Netflix from 2016 to 2018. It was a reboot of the 1984 cartoon Voltron Defender of the Universe, and was produced by DreamWorks Animation Studios with animation done by the Korean animation company Studio Mir.
The premise centers around 5 pilots flying giant mechanical lions that combine into an even bigger giant robot that fight in an intergalactic war against an alien empire that's been conquering the universe for thousands of years.
I've been really passionate about this series for almost a decade, and it was a big inspiration on my approach to analyzing Kingdom Hearts, so when I thought about the possibility of expanding the scope of my channel to analyzing other stories I love, this was the only real choice. But I'm also aware that not everyone who follows my channel for Kingdom Hearts analysis has watched the show, or even if they have, that they've seen all of it and remember it. And with the show being taken off Netflix last December, the DVDs being out of print, and the last 2 seasons not being available on iTunes, there are few ways for people to legally watch the series anymore.
Wait, I'm sorry. Hearing this just now, what do you mean they took it off of Netflix? What are they thinking?
Officially it's something about, I'm a little sus about it, exactly why myself, but the official story is that there were like contracts with Netflix for how long it would be exclusive to them for, and the contracts ran out.
They're just asking for people to sail the 7 seas. The One Piece is real, I guess, and it's Voltron.
So yeah, I figured that before I uploaded my first Voltron video essay, it would be smart to give people new to the show a recap of the series, so that they don't feel like it's a requirement to sit through 30 hours of television in order to follow what I'm talking about.
Don't have to, but very much encouraged. It's a good show.
Absolutely. Even if the final season is a mess for reasons which my first video will get into, it is definitely something still worth watching on its own, in my opinion.
Hey, that's just Game of Thrones.
So now that we got that out of the way, allow us to present to you this beginner's guide to Voltron Legendary Defender. The first episode of Netflix, technically 3 stitched together into a pilot movie, introduces the core cast of characters and sets up the conflict of the story. The first of the main characters to be introduced is Takashi Shirogane, Shiro for short, when he and his astronaut crew are abducted by aliens during a mission to Pluto's moons in the prologue.
If you don't realize now how anime-inspired this series is, we have our token Asian white-haired leader boy. It's right there, hot guy.
Shiro's escape a year later serves as the catalyst for uniting the rest of the cast and leading them to uncovering the Blue Lion hidden on Earth and subsequently getting dragged off into space. He's the level-headed, confident, and supportive leader of the team, and ends up flying the Black Lion, which forms Voltron's head and torso.
Next up, we're introduced to Lance, Pidge, and Hunk, a trio of teenagers enrolled in a spaceflight school run by the same organization that Shiro works for, known as the Galaxy Garrison, which is not Space Camp. They are legitimately scary space military people. Hunk is the engineer who tries to stay out of trouble and avoid danger and risk, and often ends up being the source of comic relief in early episodes. Despite his adverseness to danger, he serves as the muscle of the group and flies the Yellow Lion, which turns into Voltron's left leg.
Which Hunk is very enthusiastic about the first time they form Voltron.
Then we have Pidge, who is a snarky, sarcastic computer genius who is the resident science expert of the team, the Smarts, and is initially assumed to be a boy by the others before we find out that Pidge is actually a girl pulling a Mulan because her father and brother were part of Shiro's crew, and she's trying to figure out the truth after the Garrison's very bad job at covering up their abduction.
Yeah, and because of her intellect, Pidge is chosen to fly the Green Lion, which forms Voltron's left arm.
And finally, we have Lance, who, if you're following this 5-man band logic, yes, they straight up called the Lancer of the group Lance. He is the adventurous, cocky pilot who likes to look cool and impressive, but is also just a goofball. He enjoys doing silly stuff, and with his teammates, pretty much just he's just down for a good time, pretty much, whether it's by himself or with his friends.
Whether it's striking a dramatic pose after hiding in a trash can while sneaking out of the garrison, or trolling everyone when he passes gas in the Blue Lion's cockpit.
Lance is the one chosen to fly the Blue Lion, and while all the lions have reasonings of why they have their chosen partner, Lance interrupts what the explanation for the Blue Lion is, but the fact that it forms Voltron's other leg implies it involves being a support role of some kind, which he demonstrates being very good at in later episodes, both in terms of physically supporting the group in battle and in terms of providing emotional support. He's a good listener.
Exactly. And after the introduction of the trio, we meet the 5th member of the team when Lance, Pidge, and Hunk are in the middle of trying to bust Shiro out of quarantine after he crash lands back on Earth in the middle of the night.
The edgy loner bad boy himself, our 5th Lion pilot, Keith!
He's one of Lance and Hunk's classmates who got expelled during the 1-year time skip for discipline issues, implied but never explicitly stated to be the result of his reaction to the garrison's cover-up due to his close friendship with Shiro.
Again, not a good job at covering up.
Especially because their alternative explanation for being abducted by aliens was the pilot screwed up and they all crashed and died.
In space! Anyway, Keith is stubborn and impulsive, relying on his instincts a lot of the time to make decisions.
Which are all the qualities that get him chosen to pilot the Red Lion, which serves as the right arm of Voltron.
He was also the best pilot in their class before he flunked out, which gives Lance a bit of a chip on his shoulder because it's Keith's expulsion that actually allowed him to get into the fighter program because he barely made it. He was at that barely coasting thing. And there was limited spots, so Keith out, Lance in.
Yeah.
Which kind of gives him a chip on his shoulder and a one-sided rivalry against Keith, which you can see continues throughout the first 2 seasons.
Yeah, and it's Keith's habit of trusting his instincts that helps lead the team to the discovery of the Blue Lion, as the mysterious supernatural energy he was sensing led him to investigate sites connected to it, which the team is able to combine with all the data that Pidge found from scanning for alien radioactivity to lead them to the Blue Lion's hiding place.
By themselves, they could not figure this out, but when they finally came together for the first time, they immediately showed they can be a team.
Yeah. And after the team finds the Blue Lion, it takes them through a wormhole across the universe to another planet, where they find an empty castle and 2 figures sleeping in cryopods inside.
Space castle's always good sign.
Out of these pods emerge Princess Allura of the planet Altea and her royal advisor, Karan.
Yeah, Karan, best girl!
Karan, the gorgeous man.
Absolutely.
Who give the humans exposition on what exactly they've gotten themselves into and why these giant mecha cats are so important.
We learn that the aliens that have menaced the hero so far are called Galra, and that their emperor, Zarkon, has been hunting Voltron for 10,000 years? I need to know this man's skincare routine. He ended up destroying Allura's home, Altea, and killing the previous generation of Voltron paladins in his pursuit of the lions.
And the reason Zarkon wants Voltron so badly is that it's the most powerful weapon in the universe, and famed throughout the cosmos as a protector, making it the only thing capable of defeating him. And the lions are also somewhat alive and form psychic bonds with their chosen pilots, meaning that not just anyone can fly them. But Allura has a magical connection to the lions thanks to her father, King Alfor, and determines which of the humans will be a good fit for which lion. So the rest of the pilot episode focuses on the team racing to recover the other lions before one of Zarkon's commanders arrives under orders from the Emperor to seize the lions.
Which leads to a dramatic battle as the team frantically tries to figure out how to combine into Voltron for the first time. only managing it at the last moment without understanding how they did it in the first place.
And with the invading Galra ship destroyed, the humans now have to settle into their new role as the defenders of the universe.
It's kind of the start of a reluctant chosen one story.
Yeah. And although they don't get as much focus as the humans in the first episode, Karan and Allura round out the roster of the show's main cast and are set up in the first episode as Team Voltron's mission control.
Karan is established early on as a source of knowledge and tidbits about the history and culture of alien civilizations, but is also a bit eccentric. I still don't know what some of the words he said means.
Meanwhile, Princess Allura is driven by her grief over the loss of her people. When the war started, she was all for charging in to fight, but her father put her in stasis against her will to protect her before he scattered the lions. And when she wakes up, almost everyone she knew and loved is dead, while the monster who killed them is still running around inflicting that same pain on countless innocent people. So when given the choice, and with some words of encouragement from a digital avatar of her father made from his memories that he recorded for her before he died,
she has an Obi-Wan. She has a ghost Obi-Wan.
Yeah, her father's virtual ghost. But with some words of encouragement from her virtual dead dad, she gives the team direction and purpose with their goal of defeating Zarkon and bringing down his empire for good.
Although everything we've just said just sounds like Allura needs therapy first and foremost. Much of the first season is focused on the group learning to work together as a team and growing into their roles as defenders of the universe. Going from a bunch of misfits thrown into this conflict with no choice asked if they want to do this, to taking up the responsibility of themselves to this new position for their own personal reasons.
Yeah. And some characters get their own focus episodes, giving them a catalyst to grow and accept the responsibility of being a paladin. Like how Pidge is initially laser-focused on finding her family at all cost, but the team's base being attacked and her being the only one in a position to help forces her to step back and recognize that her father and brother are not the only people who need her help.
Or how Hunk is initially scared about getting involved and wanting to go home to his family on Earth, but witnessing the Empire's oppression of innocent people firsthand galvanizes his sense of justice and inspires him to
fight. Sorry, that's a typo on my part. Sorry, to fight.
How dare you write a typo that I have to say out loud? We're not cutting this out. Galvanizes his sense of justice and inspires him to fight for the people whose lives are being ruined by the Galra.
Meanwhile, the season explores bits of Shiro's missing backstory and the trauma he still carries from his time as a prisoner of the Empire, showing that even though he can't consciously remember what he experienced, the things that happened to him still haunt him.
That's right. He's not just a hot white-haired Asian anime boy. He's a hot white-haired Asian anime boy who also has missing his memories. Even more anime.
And trauma.
Oh yes, trauma is always there, yes. Can't forget the trauma.
We also get the introduction of multiple alien planets and characters that will make repeat appearances in later episodes, like the fossilized living kaiju known as Balmera and their inhabitants, the Balmerans, or the retired rebels turned smugglers, Rolo and Naima.
And the first season obviously starts fleshing out the show's biggest antagonist after their introduction in the first episode. Emperor Zarkon!
The tyrannical dictator, who is the tyrannical dictator of the Galra Empire, who rules the universe with an iron fist, leading his people with a philosophy that combines a Galra supremacist attitude with a belief in survival of the strongest, whose goal is the capture of the Voltron Lions above all else. Then there's High Priestess Hagar, Zarkon's enigmatic right-hand witch who uses magic to develop new weapons for the Empire to use in their pursuit of capturing Voltron, and is envied by the rest of the Imperial High Command because of the trust and favor that Zarkon shows her.
No one knows why he listens to this witch.
For now.
Yes.
And finally, Commander Sendak, a high-ranking Galra officer personally trained by Zarkon, sent to capture the Lions in the 3-part season premiere, who is undyingly loyal to the Empire, cruel, and willing to inflict both physical and emotional pain on his enemies in order to achieve his goals.
Basically Starscream if he was at all competent.
And wasn't an ambitious traitorous bastard.
And the season also helps to establish some important terminology and concepts that play a major role in later episodes, which is something I really love when stories make up their own words that do have meaning, such as Robeast, which are giant enemies that Hagar creates for Voltron to fight that are a mixture of robot and organic, with different Robeasts leaning more towards one end of the spectrum or the other. I love Robeasts. Their designs are so cool.
They are. And there's also Quintessence, the life energy generated by all living things, which the Galra Empire figured out how to harvest and refine it so that it's usable as an energy source to power their ships, heal their injuries, and in Zarkon's case, keep themselves alive and young millennia after they should have died from old age.
Essence of Quintessence. That's his secret.
There's also Bayards, the magical weapons of the Paladins, which were introduced in the first episode that can form into whichever weapon suits their personality or their role on the team. Everyone gets one except for Shiro, whose Bayard was lost with its Paladin, according to Allura. Meanwhile,
Hold on, this one. The weapons they form are as follows. Lance gets a rifle, Keith gets a sword, Hunk gets a heavy cannon, and Pidge doesn't get like a traditional weapon. It's kind of a grappling hook mixed with a taser kind of thing.
Yeah. And in place of the lost Black Bayard, Shiro discovers in the first episode that the robot arm the Galra gave him in place of his right arm has an energy weapon function that can basically give him a glowing power fist, basically.
Do I need to say it? Hot Asian anime boy with missing memories and trauma and white hair also has a robot arm. God, Voltron's great.
And over the course of the season, we see the Paladins figure out that the Lions have slots on their cockpit consoles that the pilot's Bayard can be plugged into to unlock new weapons and upgrades for Voltron. Keith using his unlocks Voltron's sword, Hunks gives Voltron a giant shoulder cannon, and more upgrades are unlocked over the course of the series using different combinations of Bayards like booster rockets, dual blades, and missile launchers.
The season also plants the seed for later plot developments that won't pay. The season also has a lot of foreshadowing. Very well paid off foreshadowing, my bad.
Lots of seeds planted for later plot developments that won't play out for several more seasons.
That's what foreshadowing means.
Most relevant in this case is the fact that Alteans have technology to download a person's memories and create an interactive AI that can mimic their personality, and the Paladins use this to get information on the workings of the Empire from Sendak's brain. And also that Hagar has invented a weapon called the Komar that drains an entire planet's quintessence in minutes, like they're just drawing blood, as opposed to mining and harvesting it from the environment over a period of years.
The first season culminates in the team recklessly charging into the heart of the Empire's command fleet to rescue Allura when she is captured after their efforts to infiltrate a secret base they found in Sendak's memories ends up with her trapped on a ship headed straight for Zarkon's flagship. They know it's incredibly dangerous, especially because of the risks of the universe's only hope following the Zarkon's hands. But they do it anyway, because that's what being on a team means.
Yep. And also because their ability to get anywhere quickly is dependent on her using her magical abilities to create wormholes. And she only left enough energy stored in their flying castle for them to make one more jump without her.
You could have left it just to friendship, and now you're like, oh no, they needed her as a wormhole device.
Like, obviously friendship is the main thing they focus on in the episode, but even if they were completely ignoring the friendship, there were still tactical reasons to do so.
Yeah, I know.
In the ensuing battle, the team is forced to split up when Zarkon uses Hagar's magic to force the Lions apart, and the Black Lion ejects Shiro from his cockpit, forcing him to go through the inside of Zarkon's flagship to get back to his Lion, which leads to a confrontation with Hagar that largely consists of her toying with him and leaving a glowing wound in his side before Hunk comes in after rescuing Allura and the two of them save him.
Meanwhile, Keith tries to keep Zarkon away from the Black Lion and tries to eliminate their enemy right there and then, ignoring all of Koran's warnings that Zarkon was too powerful.
only to discover that when Allura said in the first episode that the Black Bayard was lost with its paladin, she didn't mean that the previous Black Paladin was dead.
Because, here we go, first big plot twist.
It turns out that the last pilot of the Black Lion before Shiro was Zarkon himself. And not only does Zarkon still have the Black Bayard, but he quickly demonstrates why Voltron is the only thing that can defeat him by proving that he can fight one of the individual lions on foot with nothing but his Bayard and win.
Badass. Even after Keith manages to unlock the Red Lion's railgun, he's moments away from being destroyed before Shiro comes to his rescue after finally getting back the Black Lion.
Once the team is back together and in all their lions in the castle, they try to wormhole away, but Zarkon has put up a shield around his command ship that prevents them from escaping. At least until a Galra officer attacks the sentries at the barrier controls with a knife and lowers the barrier himself.
What is that about? We'll find out.
But as the team finally wormholes away, Hagar fires a blast of magic at the wormhole that corrupts it and scatters the team across the universe at random.
Season 2!
It starts off right where we left off, with everyone on the team scattered and trying to get back to each other. Every grouping of the characters gets a subplot, but Keith, Shiro, Lance, and Hunk have the most going on out of the group. Lance and Hunk get the whole second episode of the season to themselves as they end up stuck on an underwater planet full of alien mermaids whose village gives off big "there is no war in Ba Sing Se" vibes.
He will bring up that episode quite a few times, so remember that.
Yep. Meanwhile, Keith and Shiro's subplot of the first episode of the season sets up an arc that will have a major role in the rest of the series. Because when Shiro is stranded away from his lion and unable to defend himself because of the injury he sustained in his fight with Hagar, Keith manages to bond with the Black Lion and fly it himself in order to save Shiro, which convinces Shiro to choose Keith as his successor if anything happens to him.
That decision becomes one of the major emotional threads of the season, as Keith vehemently refuses to accept the possibility of Shiro ever dying, while Shiro himself has already prepared himself for that possibility.
Meanwhile, the main driving thread of the season's external plot centers around the team discovering the existence of a group of rebel Galra known as the Blade of Marmora, who oppose Zarkon's tyranny and work to undermine the Empire from the inside. Because one of their members, it turns out, was responsible for Shiro's escape from captivity and return to Earth in the very first episode. Meanwhile, another, Lieutenant Thace, was the officer who helped the team escape from Zarkon's flagship in the Season 1 finale, and who gets his own subplot over the course of the season as we see him try to navigate keeping his cover intact while Zarkon puts him in charge of investigating his own sabotage, which ultimately ends with his own capture.
Discovery of the Blade of Marmora, great name by the way, causes tension within the team as Shiro is all for the Lions when he regains his memory of his escape. Meanwhile, Allura, who still hasn't gotten to therapy, still has the trauma of losing her family and her people being still fresh, because she, even though it's been 10,000 years, for her it's not as been that long because she's been asleep. And as a result, she's hostile to all Galra, and is automatically suspicious that any of them could be trustworthy.
Which makes things awkward because at the same time, Keith begins to figure out that he himself is part Galra on his mother's side, as the dagger he carries with him in his casual outfit turns out to have the Blade of Marmora's insignia on the handle.
But before they seek out the Blade of Marmora's base, Shiro has to strengthen his bond with the Black Lion in order to stop Zarkon from also using the Black Lion. That's probably a pretty good idea. Yeah, pretty good. And also because Zarkon can even track them with the Black Lion. Black Lion being a snitch right now.
Not intentionally, obviously. And once Shiro has dealt with that, they meet at the Blade of Marmora headquarters, where the team coordinates with the leadership of the Blade of Marmora to put together a plan to lure Zarkon into an ambush and take out both him and his command ship for good. And in the middle of all that, we get an episode of the gang getting into shenanigans at a space mall while Karan tries to get new supplies to repair the castle's wormhole generator. The season also introduces a new recurring planet, Okarion, a jungle world filled with a species with technopathic abilities that allow them to create any technology they want with just their thoughts, whether it's flying metal cubes that mimic everything from voices to attacks, or combat mechs made from trees. Olkarion continues to appear throughout the show as the central hub for the rebellion, and later becomes its official headquarters, while the Olkari leader Reiner consistently appears as a supporting character in subplots involving Pidge and her family.
We are also introduced to more characters in this season who will continue to appear in future episodes, such as Colavan, the stern, no-nonsense leader of the Blade of Marmora, who cares about the men under his command, but takes a pragmatic, cautious approach to rebellion to ensure his group's collective survival in the long term, even if it means passing up opportunities for action in the short term. And there's also Slav, an eccentric genius inventor with a fixation on probabilities and alternate realities who designed the cloaking technology on some of the Blade of Marmora's bases, and got captured by the Empire off-screen before the team rescued him to help pull off their attacks on Zarkon. I know I mentioned Koran not making sense sometimes. Slav, every other word I understand.
We also get the introduction of some concepts that play key roles in the team's plan to take down Zarkon, which will continue to play important roles in later episodes, such as the Teledove, a piece of Altean technology responsible for the Castle of Lions' ability to wormhole across the universe and travel anywhere in a reasonable amount of time. And also the Weblum, a giant space worm that eats dead planets and whose body produces a mineral that is a critical component of Teledoves, which gets a whole episode dedicated to Keith and Hunk having to navigate around the inside of its body in order to get enough to make a Teledove large enough to transport Zarkon's flagship. While there, they find a masked Galra soldier whose ship got swallowed and briefly team up with them in order to escape. And while Zarkon still holds the Black Bayard, the team figures out how to upgrade Voltron's sword by plugging all the other 4 Bayards into their consoles at the same time.
The season 2 finale brings everyone back together as they've put their plan into motion to finally take Zarkon down. They lure him into a battle by letting him sense the Black Slime's location, using what he used as an advantage against him. Then, with Thace getting captured, Keith sneaks aboard Zarkon's command ship to upload the virus that they have made that will shut down all power to the ship.
Thace breaks out and teams up with Keith to get around Hagar's efforts to counteract their sabotage, and then heroically gives his life to make sure that uploading goes smoothly while Keith gets out. Then the team uses the giant Teledove to wormhole the command ship away from the protection of the main fleet, and Voltron starts carving up the ship when Zarkon hops out in his own giant mecha to take the fight to the Paladins himself.
Meanwhile, Hagar uses the Komar to try and drain Voltron's quintessence, as the Voltron is also powered by quintessence, just as Zarkon is, only for the robot to be too powerful for the Komar to handle it, ending up overloading and dying.
While Voltron gets back in the fight against Zarkon after some stalling from Allura, the princess goes to board the command ship directly, accompanied by Colavan and his lieutenant, and attack Hagar to destroy so that they can destroy the Komar for good.
Allura manages to counteract Hagar's magical energy attacks and destroy the Komar, but in the process, we learn that Hagar, not looking like the other Gara, isn't the case of the usual trope of male aliens looking all monstrous and female ones looking attractive, like attractive humans with different color skin. But in actuality, Hagar isn't Gara at all. She's
Altean!
Meanwhile, Zarkon manages to force the lions apart and knocks Shiro unconscious in the process.
When Shiro comes to, he sees his team fighting to keep Zarkon away from the Black Lion and getting their butts kicked, and desperately taps into his bond with his lion to try and help his team. In doing so, he unlocks the Black Lion's teleportation ability and uses it to steal the Black Bayard back from Zarkon before the team forms Voltron one more time to kick Zarkon's ass.
Is that what happened? I just thought he connected he was like fully chosen at that moment, so the Bayard just came to him like Mjolnir or something.
He connected and then warped and then teleported through Zarkon's mech and grabbed the lion as they went.
Oh yeah, it's been so long.
All the times I rewatched the series over the years has paid off.
Yeah, that's why you did it.
After a few more hits, they manage to run Voltron's mech through with Voltron's sword, but since the mech's hands are still free, Zarkon tries one last attack to try and destroy Voltron. As Shiro cries out in pain from the attack, the Bayard outlet on the console starts flashing, and he finally inserts his Bayard into Voltron for the first time. And with Shiro plugging in the Black Bayard at the same time that Keith's is plugged in, we get the first appearance of Voltron's most iconic weapon from the original 80s cartoon,
Fire Sword!
the Blazing Sword. The activation of what pop culture considers Voltron's signature weapon causes Zarkon's mech to explode, with the shockwave not only forcing the lions apart, but leaving the Black Lion completely unresponsive.
The team races back to the castle, dragging the Black Lion along as they go, and hurry aboard before they escape through a wormhole as the power comes back on as power returns to Zarkon's flagship. But with no contact from Shiro, Keith rushes to the Black Lion's hangar, screaming his name as he goes, and when the doors to the Black Lion's cockpit opens, they find no Shiro. Disappeared without a trace, with the Black Bayard still plugged in.
Meanwhile, Hagar has recovered Zarkon from the wreck of his mech suit and looks down at his comatose body on life support before stepping outside to face the assembled senior officers of the Empire and give the order that reveals that defeating Zarkon was not the end of the story, because Zarkon has a son.
Zarkon's a daddy? I fully regret saying that.
The first half of Season 3 focuses on the aftermath of the fight with Zarkon. The heroes have been capitalizing on their success to free more planets from Galra control, but they're having difficulty convincing those planets to pool their resources into the coalition that Allura is hoping to build, because all of them want to see Voltron in action as a reassurance that victory against the Galra is possible. Which they obviously can't do because Shiro is still missing, and Keith refuses to give up on finding him or entertain the idea of anyone else flying the Black Lion.
At the end of the first episode, the team finally convinces Keith to accept that they have to move forward and that the universe won't wait for them to find Shiro. So he reluctantly accepts the position of the new Black Paladin, different Lion, same suits, because no one else could do it. Everyone else tried and failed because the Lion wouldn't respond to them, which in turn causes additional shakeups in the Lion's roster as the Red Lion then chooses Lance to fill the vacant spot as the right hand of Voltron,
while Allura is chosen by the Blue Lion to take over Lance's role as one of Voltron's legs.
Meanwhile, we are officially introduced to Zarkon's son, Prince Lotor, Hot Boy,
who returns from exile to manage the Empire while his father recovers from the injuries he sustained at the end of Season 2.
Sorry, let me be clear. Hot alien anime white-haired boy.
Hot white-haired anime alien elf boy.
Alien elf boy antagonist.
Lotor brings with him his most trusted generals, a quartet of half-Galra ladies who, together with Lotor, basically serve as the closest Voltron equivalent of Azula's trio in Avatar: The Last Airbender. Azor is the Ty Lee of the group and the one with the bubbly, energetic personality. Zethrid is the bruiser who loves fighting and blowing stuff up. Aksha is the serious, protocol-focused second-in-command, and also turns out to be the same Galra that Keith encountered in the Weblum back in Season 2. And Narti is the silent, mysterious one who can control people's minds and uses a psychic link with her cat Kova to see because she doesn't have eyes.
As for Lotor himself, he establishes himself right out of the gate as vastly different than his father, in terms of both his personality and his behavior as an antagonist.
Zarkon spent most of the first 2 seasons sitting on his throne and delegating the actual work of fighting the heroes to his minions, and was very direct and straightforward with dealing with his foes most of the time.
In contrast, Lotor seems like he's get his hands dirty and actively engages with the heroes multiple times during the series,
and doing so directly in person instead of through proxies like his father. Where his father gives no thought to the lives of even his own soldiers, Lotor explicitly forbids his generals from killing enemy combatants. And where Zarkon's obsession with getting the Black Lion back demonstrated how stuck in the past he was, Lotor encourages the Galra as a people to embrace change and preaches about how doing things differently can make the Empire grow.
But for the most part, Lotor is content to let the Empire fend for itself against the rebellion, while he flies around working on his own personal agenda and only calls on Imperial resources when he needs reinforcements.
His big focus in the first half of Season 3 is testing the capabilities of Voltron and its paladins to see how well the reality lives up to the legends and rumors. Which leaves him disappointed at first because of the fact that the team is in the middle of the Lion swap when he lures them into an ambush for his first test. Because half the team is in brand new Lions that have different controls than their new pilots are used to,
and one of these pilots is just recently became a pilot,
the team has lost the cohesion and teamwork they had when Shiro was still there. And Keith as a leader is focused on constant action, going after Lotor relentlessly without giving the team time to recover or adjust after their first battle with the Galra Prince. It's only after their lack of planning and his expecting everyone else to keep up with him drives them into a second trap and blows up in their faces that Keith recognizes that he messed up. And after some encouragement from Lance, he manages to lead the team back together and finally gets everyone in sync enough that they can form Voltron again, which Lotor apparently considers a good thing when it comes to his agenda.
Finally, in the second half of the season, we get to see what happened to Shiro, with a whole episode dedicated to him escaping from a Galra research facility and powering through obstacle after obstacle to make it back to the team, which, unbeknownst to him, is exactly what the Empire wants, as he was allowed to escape as part of something that the ship's commanding officer refers to as Operation Kuron. K-U-R-N-O.
K-U-R-O-N.
I don't know how to spell. Keep reading.
And we also get insight into the dynamic between Lotor and Hagar, with her sending spies after him to monitor his activities and keep him in line, which Lotor openly resents and is hostile to her as a result, while he goes to great lengths to keep his plans hidden from her, to the point of setting up one of his political rivals as a scapegoat to keep her attention away from him. Meanwhile, we finally learn what makes Voltron so special and powerful when the Paladins discover an Altean distress signal stuck in the middle of a glowing portal that leads to an alternate reality where Altea was never destroyed. We then find out that what makes Voltron unique is that the Lions are all made from the ore of a comet that can cross between realities, and that there's another comet on board the very ship that the team is investigating. And we also learned that in the universe the team ended up in, the Alteans are the evil empire bent on dominating the universe.
Which introduces more shades of gray to Allura's worldview. Let's put some less, make it less racist. And reinforces Hagar's reveal and the message that just as all Galra are not inherently evil, Alteans are not all inherently good.
The team manages to take the Transreality Comet back to their home universe to keep it out of the Altean Empire's hands, only for Lotor to swoop in and steal it from them, revealing that he was the one who set up the distress beacon, specifically so he could have Voltron retrieve the comet for him since he didn't have the tools to recover it himself.
After that, Shiro's return causes some unexpected friction in the team, while they try to track down the stolen comet. Having him back on top, along with Allura taking over the Blue Lion, makes Lance feel insecure about his place on the team, which ends up being a moot point because the Black Lion doesn't respond to Shiro anymore.
But despite Keith being solidified as the new leader of Voltron, Shiro finds himself backseat piloting when it comes to Keith's decisions as leader, which causes some strain when their search for the comet leads them to a Galra research lab in the middle of it being attacked by Lotor's generals. When the team discovers that Lotor has already constructed a ship from the comet, Keith wants to eliminate the threat it poses by taking out its creator, while Shiro wants to destroy the comet ship altogether before it can launch.
Then they discover that the lab houses one of the pieces of the giant teledove that Voltron used against Zarkon in the Season 2 finale, which Lotor's generals are very intent on stealing.
Which forces Keith to pick and choose between fighting Aksha and Narti in the comet ship because they're an immediate threat to the team's survival, and stopping Ezor and Zethrid from getting away with the Teledove fragment to prevent the future consequences of it falling into Lotor's hands. After tricking Aksha into destroying the Teledove herself, the team reconvenes to try and piece together what Lotor's ultimate goal is.
We are then treated to a whole episode of flashbacks, as Koran tells the Paladins the story of how the war began and the friendship between the original Paladins fell apart. How a trans-reality comet, sounds familiar? Crashed on the Galra home planet, Dibazol, tearing open a rift in fabric of reality, leading to a space between universes filled with infinite energy known as the Quintessence Field.
How King Alfor built the Voltron Lions from the comet, while Zarkon's Altean wife Onerva experimented with the properties of quintessence and the rift, inadvertently summoning shapeless entities from outside their universe to attack the Galra homeworld and necessitate the Lions' debut. And how Onerva's experiments caused her health and sanity to deteriorate, leading Zarkon to trick his fellow paladins into enlarging the rift so that he could bathe his wife in the quintessence field, which resulted in the Galra homeworld destabilizing, forcing Alfor to evacuate and then destroy the planet to keep the rift from spreading to the rest of the universe.
Meanwhile, Zarkon and Onerva were exposed to so much quintessence that it killed them, and then brought them back from the dead shortly after, while the presence of the rift creatures caused them to be infected with the entities upon their resurrection, twisting their minds to less savory means.
And although the heroes don't know it, the audience gets to see that Onerva became Hagar after her resurrection thanks to her declining health at the time of her rift bath, giving her amnesia after she comes back to life. She only starts to get her memories back at the end of the episode, when using her magic to wake Zarkon up in the present day causes her to get a glimpse of his memories and remember who they are to each other.
Then we get to the halfway point, Season 4, which is a mix of mini-arcs and standalone episodes due to some plot changes caused by conflicts with one of the voice actors' other scheduling commitments.
We get a time skip of several months later to Keith running missions with the Blade of Marmora to learn more about his Galra heritage, which causes friction for the rest of the team because these missions are causing him to flake on his responsibilities as Black Paladin, culminating in him taking a leave of absence from the team to focus on his Blade's work after his absence forces Shiro to reconnect with the Black Lion.
Then we got Pidge finally tracking down her brother, Matt, and bringing him back to the Castle of Lions to meet the rest of them.
Meanwhile, Zarkon finally recovers enough to resume command of the Empire and relieves Lotor of his position. Then Hagar finds out about Lotor's comet ships, which he's dubbed Syncline, by using her magic to turn Narti into an unknowing spy cam and brings her discovery right to Zarkon, who immediately orders his own son's death and mobilizes the Imperial Navy to attack Lotor's command ship.
Father of the Year brings back the milk and a knife.
Which leads Lotor to figure out that Narti was compromised and strike her down before he and the rest of his generals make their getaway.
Meanwhile, the season features a recurring thread of paladins performing rebel propaganda to drum up support for the coalition that they're trying to make. They can't do this alone.
This subplot happens in the background of Keith's Focus episode and gets an entire episode dedicated to it that basically serves as the show's closest equivalent to the Ember Island Players episode from Avatar. Except instead of poking fun at fans, it's poking fun at things in the entertainment industry, as the episode revolves around Karan getting a brain parasite that makes him obsessed with making the shows a bigger and bigger spectacle at the expense of safety, factual accuracy, and the team's dignity.
All of these plot lines come together for the last 2 episodes of the season, where Voltron pulls together all the planets and individuals who have pledged themselves to the coalition as a result of these broadcasts to launch a coordinated assault on multiple fronts that will claim a third of the Empire's territory in a single strike. I'm sorry I paused there, but there's a good reason. Is this also the season where Cosmo shows up?
You're 2 seasons early.
Dang!
Meanwhile, Lotor brings his generals to the ruins of the Galra homeworld and reveals the interreality gate that he had built there in order to obtain quintessence from the space between universes. But when he tries to test it, it fails, and his generals turn on him because he didn't explain what happened with Narti, and they're all scared that one of them will be the next to die. Lotor escapes and flies off on his own, then spends most of the last episode evading his father's personal hunting party while Voltron tries to escape a booby trap that Hagar planted on one of the planets they were targeting that will explode and kill everyone nearby. When Lotor hears about the impending explosion through Imperial radio chatter, he rushes off to the rescue and saves the day by blowing up the weird attachment Hagar put on her personal ship that let her amplify her magic to trigger the bomb.
Once Hagar withdraws from the battlefield, Lotor tells Voltron and the rebels that it's time they had a talk. And while they aren't major parts, the season does introduce 2 new elements that will play a larger role in later episodes.
First, Keith and Coliban find a new type of quintessence that's more refined and concentrated, and therefore more powerful, than the standard version used for Imperial fuel and medical care. And second, the first part of the Coalition's assault on the Empire introduces a new type of weapon known as Zyforge cannons. Large, long-range laser guns that can fire planet-killer-tier lasers at targets that are halfway across the galaxy or more.
Death Star, eat your heart out.
Put Starkiller Base to shame, too.
Oh, yeah.
When we start Season 5, the team is using the intel Lotor is giving them on the Empire to eliminate targets critical to the Galra war machine with no rebel casualties whatsoever, but they still question whether Lotor is trustworthy on a personal level.
When they need a new set of targets, he gives them the location of the prison where Pidge's father is being held.
This naturally leads Pidge and Matt to make a rescue attempt with the help of Rolo and Naima. But by the time they get there, Pidge's dad is already gone, because Lotor's former generals got there first and brought Papa Holt, you
can say daddy, it's okay. I said it, you can say it.
Because Lotor's former generals got there first and brought Daddy Holt to Zarkon to...
I didn't think you were actually gonna do it.
To offer a hostage exchange for Lotor in exchange for Zarkon pardoning them. The hostage trade takes up most of the second episode of the season, with flashbacks to the team debating whether or not to go through with it. With Pidge and Lance favoring handing Lotor over to Zarkon no questions asked, and Allura and Hunk seriously considering the benefits of having Lotor around and on their side.
Zarkon inevitably double-crosses everyone, resulting in a duel between Lotor and his father, while the Paladins rescue Pidge's dad, with the duel ultimately ending in Lotor permanently... permanently, he doesn't come back. Lotor kills Zarkon! And also added, it makes it more interesting, he does it to stop him from firing at Voltron.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Onerva finishes regaining her memories, including those of being pregnant when she went into the rift, and finally realizes that Lotor is her son.
Mommy?
And when she hears about the hostage exchange, she immediately rushes off to activate Stage 4 of Operation Corone.
In the aftermath of Zarkon's death, we learn that the Galra choose their next leader through a ceremony called the Kralzera, where contenders have to fight their way to the top of a temple and light a ceremonial fire, rather than doing direct inheritance through a single bloodline.
So after Lotor kills his father, Team Voltron helps him to take the Imperial throne in order to lead the Empire toward peace.
But not every faction in the Galra Empire accepts the idea of Lotor being emperor. Multiple factions rebel against him and start fighting both his forces and each other for territory and control.
Including Sendak, who Onerva had brought back as her candidate for the Kralzera, and then went on to found his own faction known as the Fire of Purification after the Civil War broke out.
So the Fire Nation is back. Lance starts to notice that Shiro's behavior is noticeably off lately. Even though Shiro keeps insisting that he's fine in moments when he's distressed, and the audience finds out that Onerva is now spying on Voltron, and Lotor, of course, through him, just like she did with Narti. So Shiro is now a nanny cam.
Yep. Pidge's dad returns to Earth so that he can start upgrading Earth's defenses, and carries with him messages for the team's families, blueprints for all the alien ships and technology he's encountered, and copies of all the data in the Castle of Lions computers.
Hunk starts on a bit of a diplomatic arc, learning the history and culture of the Galra as a people from Lotor's governess, Nanny, in order to be able to get other Galra who aren't already their allies to work with them.
And he puts this to good use when he has to get 2 bickering Galra officers to get along when Sendak destroys their Omega Shield, a space station protecting their planet from intense solar radiation.
Meanwhile, Allura and Lotor start getting closer and closer. A bond over their shared Altean lineage, particularly, I hate that word, particularly when they go on a solo trip together to Orient. I am making it sound worse than it is. a mystical realm from Altean mythology that's considered the origin of their people's magic traditions.
And as they grow closer, Lance continually finds himself jealous of the time they spend together, because he's spent the entire series so far trying to woo her, and the fact that he's ending up as a third wheel for her and Lotor feeds into his insecurities. While all of these subplots are going on, Keith is sent on a Blade mission to extract a deep cover agent named Krolia from her post when the base she's stationed at becomes a target from anti-Lotor factions in the Galra Civil War. And after Krolia tricks one of the factions that invaded her base into unleashing a giant monster on themselves,
we find out that is Keith's mom!
They don't have time to do a warm and fuzzy family reunion at first, because she has a lead on the source of the enhanced quintessence that Keith and Cole-Levant have been tracking, but the trail takes them through a place called the Quantum Abyss, a region of space with such large celestial objects that their gravitational pull on each other not only warps time and space, but can cause travelers to experience visions of the past and future.
Through this plot device, we learn how Keith's parents met when his mom crashed on Earth while trying to keep Imperial scouts from finding the Blue Lion.
When she got pregnant with Keith, she planned on staying, but after another group of scouts came and nearly killed his father before she could stop them from reporting to Zarkon, she went back into space when Keith was still a baby to try and redirect the Empire away from Earth.
They eventually make it through the Quantum Abyss, though because of its warping in time and space, the mother-son duo experienced 2 years in there, while only a few months pass for the rest of the universe, so mother-son time, yay!
And when they reach the end of the road, the trail of the enhanced quintessence leads them to a dome containing a holographic simulation of a pastoral landscape and something that they never expected to find. Another Altean.
Dun dun dun!
Then just before everything comes to a head in the final arc of Season 6, we get a brief Calm Before the Storm episode as the Paladins sit down to play a game of Space D&D.
Yeah, no... If you haven't watched this and you had 100 guesses, I don't think you would have guessed that.
And then everything climaxes in the second half of Season 6.
While Allura and Lotor are finally testing the third Syncline ship and successfully gain access to the Quintessence Field, Keith and his mom return to the castle with the Altean that they found,
who introduces herself as Rommel and reveals that Lotor has been keeping the surviving Alteans hidden on a planet beyond the Quantum Abyss. Rommel accuses Lotor of murdering countless Alteans by harvesting their quintessence, including her younger brother Bandor, under the guise of sending them to a second colony where they are supposed to be safe.
When the Paladins finally confront Lotor over this, he admits that many Alteans died as a result of his actions, and while appealing to Allura, she knocks him unconscious.
Before anyone can process everything, though, Lotor's generals break in and steal the Syncline ships, and while the team is distracted handling that, Unnerva takes control of Shiro through their link and makes him turn against his teammates to extract Lotor from the castle.
Keith takes up the mantle of Black Lion again to lead Voltron into battle, but is then forced to save Shiro alone.
Yeah. Unnerva reunites with Lotor and tries to reconnect with him by praising what he did at the Altean colony, but Lotor remains firmly in denial that Hagar and his mother are the same person. Then his general Aksha shoots Unnerva and frees Lotor, who convinces Ezor and Zethra to join him once more as he leaves to return to the Riftgate. While Unnerva is busy with her reunion, she sends Shiro to lead Keith away from her fleet, while the rest of Team Voltron scrambles to stop a virus planted by Shiro's robot arm from setting off the castle's self-destruct.
Keith follows Shiro to a facility where he finds row after row of unconscious Shiro clones in stasis tubes. Horror. I mean, hot, but horror. Horror hot. Anyway.
Yeah, confirming what everyone had been thinking ever since people saw Season 3 and figured out that Kuron was the Japanese word for clone. And we are then treated to a lengthy, dramatic fight between Keith and Shiro as Keith tries to get through to Shiro as his best friend repeatedly antagonizes him while the facility comes apart around them through a combination of the self-destruct and a laser built into Shiro's arm.
I feel I should make this clear. I'm not saying I think Shiro is hot, I'm saying he's objectively hot. And I can respect that. I'm not saying I ain't personally, but... Anyway, their fight ultimately ends with Keith cutting off Shiro's robot arm. They made multiple robot arms just for the clones. That's just dedication. And then collapsed the facility, knocking Shiro unconscious, leaving Keith hanging over the edge of a dangling scaffolding by his knife with one hand and holding Shiro in his other.
Keith can't pull both of them up one-handed, so he chooses to fall with Shiro rather than let go to save himself.
Luckily, they're saved at the last minute by the Black Lion off-screen, and Keith finds himself at the start of the next episode on an astral plane that represents the inside of the Black Lion.
There, Shiro appears to him and reveals that the version of him that Keith had been fighting was another clone, and that the original Shiro has been dead ever since the end of Season 2, with his consciousness having been absorbed into the Black Lion.
So it's actually Shiro and the Black Lion that chose Keith.
Keith wakes up inside the Black Lion and starts making his way back to rejoin the others. Meanwhile, Lotor is doing the same thing, and on the way he tells Ezor and Zethrid that their betrayal was all part of the plan in order to make himself look trustworthy to the Paladins. And as that's happening, Karan and the Paladins are trying to get the castle working again after the damage that Clone Shiro's virus did to its systems.
When Keith calls to let them know he detected Lotor's ship en route, they suit up in their lions and destroy the Rift Gate to keep him from harvesting any more energy from the Quintessence Field.
When Lotor shows up and finds the Rift Gate destroyed, he tries to plead with Allura that they're on the same side and that his intentions were genuine.
But Allura is a lover scorned and very pissed about him lying, and responds that Lotor is no different than his father. Ooh, hitting in the ooh.
Which is the straw that finally breaks the camel's back for Lotor as he orders his generals to destroy the lions and goes on the offensive, shouting into the comms about how he'll create a new Altea that will never remember Allura, her father, or Voltron, and that he's going to wipe the slate clean of all his enemies, from Voltron and Hagar to the rest of the Galra. Which makes his generals understandably freak out and decide that giving him a second chance wasn't worth it. So they try to disengage from the fight, only for Lotor to remotely override their ship's controls and eject them before combining all three ships together into his own giant robot Syncline.
The Syncline then proceeds to thrash the lions until Shiro's spirit helps Keith unlock the Black Lion's teleportation ability to close the remaining distance to their location and rejoin the fight so that they can finally form again Voltron!
And the fight between Voltron and Syncline wrecks what's left of Dibazol before ultimately moving inside the Quintessence Field itself. They manage to defeat Lotor by overloading all of Syncline's systems, and despite Allura's protests, they leave Lotor behind in the rift in order to escape. But the danger isn't over yet, because Syncline spent most of the fight around Dibazol hopping in and out of the Quintessence Field at will, creating multiple small tears in the fabric of reality that are growing and will eventually consume everything.
To save all of existence, the team is forced to sacrifice the Castle of Lions, because overloading the Teledoves is the only way to generate enough power to close all the rifts at once. The force of the explosion compresses the remains of the castle down to the size of a small diamond, which the team picks up before they leave.
They settle down on a nearby planet, while Keith fills everyone in on Shiro's spirit still being inside the Black Lion. Since the clone body has yet to regain consciousness and is barely living, according to Keith, Allura uses the magic she gained from Orion to transfer the original Shiro's consciousness from the Black Lion to the clone body. With Shiro reborn, the team sets their sights on returning to Earth to use the plans that Pidge's father took with him to build a replacement for the Castle of Lions.
Adding on to the fact that Shiro being reborn means he gets both the memories of old Shiro, but he also gets the memories of clone Shiro.
Yeah, they don't really address it in the show, but they did this. But the showrunners confirmed that was the case.
Hooray!
Yeah.
First half of season 7, we're almost there.
The first half of season 7 then focuses on the journey back to Earth, with the first episode focusing on the Paladins trying to recharge their lions enough to fly again, while we get flashbacks to Shiro and Keith's backstory as Shiro recovers from the soul transfer. As they make their way back to Earth, they find themselves unable to make contact with any of their allies, and even the Blade of Marmora outpost they encounter on the way has been mysteriously abandoned.
They are then attacked by a group of Galra ships that turn out to be led by Ezor and Zethrid, who capture the cast and interrogate them about what happened to Lotor and where the team has been since the battle.
While Karan comes to the team's rescue with Allura's pet mice, Aksha shows up and ends up helping them all escape, after which she reveals that the energy of the explosion at the Rift in the Season 6 finale caused our main heroes to skip forward in time 3 years. With Voltron and Lotor missing, the Galra Empire collapsed into infighting, with many Imperial Galra becoming warlords carving out their own territory, while others like Ezor and Zethrid became pirates, and Hagar has disappeared to parts unknown.
Meanwhile, the rebellion suffered heavy loss as a result of Hagar's mage gang systematically hunting the Blade of Marmora near to extinction. Still missing Hagar, of course. They've also got it. They also done doing their own thing.
Yeah, they're very fanatically trying to like prove themselves and they tried to like prove themselves and think that like, we can win Hagar's approval back.
And after the team rescues Colavan from one of these said mage gang, who are, the term is druid, but I like saying mage gang. He reveals that he sent a team to the Altean colony only to find the entire place abandoned. All the Alteans missing without a trace. In the middle of all these things going on, we get an episode where the team is randomly pulled into an intergalactic game show as the season's main comedy episode, where the team has to endure the challenges of an obnoxious and trolling host in order to escape. Bob! The journey to Earth reaches its end with an episode where Keith, Lance, Hunk, Pidge, and Allura get stranded away from their lions, and they find their bond with each other tested as the isolation and exhaustion makes them all cranky with each other. After fighting off a space monster together, they manage to get back together, and the combination of an unexplained space anomaly and Lance and Keith using their Bayards to unlock booster rockets for Voltron propels them the rest of the way to Earth's solar system. However, in the second half of Season 7, they learn that the Earth has already been invaded and conquered by Sendak in order to lure Voltron into a trap. And we're treated to a 2-episode flashback showing how Pidge's dad built up the planet's defenses and invented new ships to combat the Galra, such as a new type of fighter jet with engines and weapons upgraded by alien tech dubbed the MFE Ares fighter, as well as a massive command ship known as the IGF Atlas that the garrison still struggles to find an adequate power source for. And the flashbacks also introduce a bunch of key players at the garrison, like Admiral Sonda, the strict by-the-book head of the garrison who insisted on covering up everything to avoid mass panic. Great job. Took a very conservative approach to the invasion that got a whole squadron of pilots killed for nothing, 0 for 2, and reacts very poorly to having her authority questioned or challenged. Like, ooh, you just gotta love her, don't ya? Or the MFE pilots, a quartet of the Paladin's former classmates who serve as the test pilots of the new fighter planes that Pidge's dad developed, and end up becoming one of the only attack squadrons that can do any significant damage to the Galra fleet. This group consists of the quiet, reserved Kincaid, the excitable adrenaline junkie Rizavi, the intelligent and socially awkward, how do you pronounce this? Leif's daughter. What he said. And the by-the-book team leader, James Griffin. That's so American. We're also introduced to Veronica, Lance's older sister who works at the garrison as an analyst, but proves to have excellent combat skills on a supply run with the MFE pilots, and helps to coordinate with local resistance forces after she's presumed dead for a while. And we also get more fleshing out of Commander Iverson, the Paladin's instructor from the first episode of the series, and see that he does have a soft side underneath the gruff, strict exterior we saw in Season 1, and unlike Admiral Sonda, he's willing to adapt and trust the judgment of others. You know, kind of like a usual drill sergeant. They're hard, despite their hard exterior, some of them are actually hard on the inside too. Anyway, to avoid Sendak holding the planet hostage in exchange for their surrender, the Paladins park their lions on Saturn's moon and sneak onto Earth in a stolen Galra starfighter. Wait, Cosmo was introduced already, wasn't he? Why did we mention Cosmo? Sorry, he doesn't really come up a lot in terms of like the overall plot stuff. There's a space wolf! People want to know about you want people to enjoy it and be interested in this show, and you're ignoring mentioning there's a teleporting space wolf? That's a lone wolf bad boy gets a pet space wolf! Anyway, once they get back to the garrison, Space Wolf, Lance and Pidge reunite with their families while Hunk learns that his is being held captive in one of Sendak's work camps. Ruh-roh.
The team gets debriefed on the state of the resistance and settles in at the garrison as they figure out their next move. Keith and Hunk scout out where Hunk's parents are being held with help from Griffin and Veronica. Pidge and Allura interrogate the digital avatar made from Sendak's memories that they downloaded back in Season 1. And Shiro gets a replacement robot arm powered by the gem in Allura's crown.
Then the Paladins and MFE pilots team up to infiltrate the nearest Galra base and discover that Sendak is building a Zyforge cannon to destroy Earth.
6 Zyforge cannons, to be precise.
Great! Even better! By combining the beams of the cannons and using Omega shields in orbit to reflect the shots around the world at will.
The team uses their bonds with their lions to remotely summon them to Earth so they can stop the Zyforge cannons, but before they can destroy the cannons in orbit, the Paladins and their lions are captured. Because Admiral Sonda decided that the best way to protect humanity was to give Sendak what he wanted in return for him leaving Earth.
Just so many fails with this woman.
But he naturally double-crosses her and throws her in the brig alongside the Paladins and prepares to destroy the planet anyway. The garrison manages to launch the Atlas using the diamond made from the compressed remains of the Castle of Lions as its power source, and Shiro takes charge as its first captain, coordinating the garrison's fight against Sendak's fleet while the Paladins manage to escape by figuring out how to use the links with their lions to pilot them remotely.
Sonda, who is just sucked this whole time, redeems herself by dying. I'm sorry, that's kind of mean. No, Mike, I'll give her this. She gives her life to protect the Paladins from Sendak's lieutenants. While they're doing this, buying them time to tear open a hole in the side of Sendak's ship for them all to escape.
And with Voltron and the garrison working together, they manage to destroy the Zyforge cannons, save Earth, and wipe out Sendak's fleet. Shiro and Sendak have a rematch of their fight from Season 1 on the top of Sendak's command ship as it falls through the atmosphere, and although Sendak gets the upper hand when the ship finally hits the ground, Keith swoops in at the last moment to save Shiro and deal the final blow to Sendak and his faction. But before our heroes can celebrate, a new giant robot lands on Earth out of nowhere and starts attacking Voltron. It's fast, strong, and is armed with a Komar in its chest to drain energy from its opponents.
It proves to be a very tough and challenging foe. Even after Shiro discovers the Atlas has the ability to transform into an even bigger giant robot that makes Voltrons look tiny. Cause what's cooler than a big robot? An even bigger robot! But when the Paladins finally defeat the enemy robot, it starts to overload and threatens to destroy most of the Earth's surface, forcing the Paladins to tow it away very fast into orbit before it explodes. And the force of the blast manages to leave them hospitalized for a good bit.
With Earth safe, all the heroes' surviving allies in space come to Earth and help humanity rebuild, while the garrison works to recover pieces of the mystery robot over the next several months before they finally locate the pilot capsule and discover one of the missing Alteans inside.
Finally, we reach the final season, the dreaded Season 8.
Yeah, Season 8 is, to put it mildly, a bit of a mess for reasons that I will be properly getting into detail on in Constructing Legends Episode 1. There's a bunch of individual things happening in each episode, nearly all of which will be touched on in at least one future video, but this summary is going to just focus on a few of the key things that you need to know to understand the gist of the show. Lance finally asks Allura out on a date in the first episode, and they start a relationship that lasts for the rest of the series. We find out that the Alteans are working for Unnerva to avenge Lotor, and that she was the one responsible for Sendak's invasion of Earth and the Altean Robeast the team fought in the season finale, and that she's able and willing to use her magic to kill any of them that say too much about her plans to the heroes.
At this point in the series, Unnerva has become obsessed with getting her son Lotor back and taking revenge on all the people who hurt him.
From the Galra to Voltron, while also denying her own culpability in how she herself has hurt him throughout his childhood, whether by passively standing by as he faced Zarkon's disdain and cruelty, or through her constant attempts to invade his privacy and control how he did things as Emperor. She pretty much wants to get a do-over where she can have the happy family that she and Zarkon were so excited for and give herself a blank slate from all the hurt she inflicted on her kid when she actually had him in front of her.
Meanwhile, the Paladins invade a Galra-inhabited planet and try to convince the Galra to join their coalition peacefully, but have to win the commander's trust by saving him from the monster that Krolia unleashed back in Season 5.
They find out that Alkarion was destroyed by an Altean Robeast, encounter Zethrid's pirate crew again, and then track down Onerva to Oriond,
where she and Alteans manage to tear open a hole into the Quintessence Field, again, and get Lotor back, only for him to be unable to distinguish friend from foe and aggressively attack everyone around him, except for Allura.
After that, we get the MFE pilots doing a documentary-style episode of daily life aboard the Atlas that culminates in Hunk using his cooking and diplomacy skills to get the Altean Robeast pilots they captured after Oriond to be more receptive to Allura and Ramel.
Season 8, Part B, we're almost there.
Then Allura finds out about the Rift creatures when Onerva tries to kill one of the Alteans. And while the rest of the team has fun at a carnival on a planet they'd visited for their propaganda tour back in Season 4, the princess has a dream sequence that convinces her to put one inside herself in order to become more powerful to counter Onerva's abilities.
After that, she passes out for 2 days. Great idea. The team then spends 2 episodes using the Rift creature to travel inside Onerva's mind in order to learn what she's up to.
Ultimately, they ultimately learn that Lotor has somehow died off screen, and that Onerva's next plan is to tear her way out of their universe to find an alternate reality where both her husband and son are still alive, and she can have the happy family life she never got to have, even if she has to destroy every other universe in her way in order to do so.
She pulls a Wilson Fisk from Spider-Verse before Wilson Fisk.
Yeah, actually, it was actually right around the same time actually, that they came out.
We'll look that up. Anyway, she builds a new mech. She builds a new mech that allows her to scan other universes to find the one she wants. Then fuses that mech with the Syncline in order to journey outside realities.
Voltron and Atlas fuse in order to follow her, while Karan, Pidge's dad, and the rest of the Atlas crew stay behind to try and keep their reality from collapsing on their side.
Bigger robot!
But the team is soon left in the dust as Onerva finally makes her way to a universe where she died in Lotor's childhood, Voltron was never invented, and the Galra Empire's war against the rest of the universe never happened.
Yet, even in her supposed perfect reality, Lotor still rejects her, causing Onerva to snap and decide that if she can't have a universe where she can't be happy, neither can anyone else. Leading to the dramatic final battle between Voltron and Onerva at the nexus of all realities as Onerva tries to erase all universes in existence. Nexus of all realities is such a cool-ass term.
By the end of the fight, all realities except for one have been erased, and the heroes find themselves inside a mental realm where they manage to appeal to what little good is left inside Onerva, and as well as her love for her son, to convince her to stop her rampage. But in order to restore all the universes that Onerva destroyed, both she and Allura have to sacrifice their lives in order to restore all of existence.
We then jump ahead a year to see how the rest of the heroes are doing post-war.
Pidge is working at the garrison building robots.
Hunk has built a career using his intergalactic catering business as a tool for diplomacy and peace negotiations.
Keith helps reorganize the Blade of Marmora into a relief organization alongside Aksha, Azor, and Zethrid.
Our favorite hot boy Asian, I've lost the words, but he gets married. He's not single anymore.
To a random garrison extra and retires.
Lance rotates between working on his family's farm and spreading the gospel of Allura.
And on the anniversary of Allura's sacrifice, the team wakes up after their reunion dinner to see the Lions fly off to parts unknown, with a post-credit shot showing them flying toward an Allura-shaped nebula in the stars.
Wait, why do they fly off again?
They never explain.
Of course. Anyway, let's wrap this up.
So, that's the gist you need to know of Voltron Legendary Defender in order to understand the basics of my videos. My first video essay is up now, so go right ahead and give it a watch. And if you someday get a chance to watch the show for yourself, I definitely encourage you to do so because this summary could not cover everything. In spite of how much of a mess the final season is, the rest of the show holds up incredibly well, and I personally feel it's worth watching up to the end of Season 7 at the very least.
Thank you for watching my friend Howler's videos. Please keep doing that. We are very grateful for that. Like and subscribe, all of that stuff.
And also check out Moral Support's art channel.
You don't have to.
And the game.
No, we really don't shout me out. I'm here as moral support. That means I'm not here.
It is my code to give a shout out to anyone I co-host with. To shout.
Well, I'm making you an oath breaker. How about that? Look, it's fine. My links will be in the description. I can't stop him. Again, I don't know why he invited me aside from he wanted me to make jokes and react to his script, which I'm more than happy to do for my friends. So, if you enjoyed this video, I hope you're excited for his next series, Constructing Legends.
Thank you all for coming, and go enjoy the videos.
Peace!